before we dive in, if this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. Where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? Let's get started. Let me take you back to the exact moment my world shifted. It was the night before Mother's Day. 11:53 p.m. My phone lit up in the darkness. It was my cousin Tasha. Now, Tasha wasn't the type to call late unless something serious was happening. So when I answered, I sat straight up in bed. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause, a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Then her voice came through, small, shaky, uncertain. "Maya, I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to see something." My stomach dropped instantly. "What happened?" "Check your messages," she whispered. "And please, don't open it around anyone." I opened WhatsApp with trembling fingers, and that's when I saw it. The family group chat. The one called Caldwell Legacy. The one my mother created to plan holidays, birthdays, and what she called important family events. Except, I wasn't in it anymore. I blinked hard, thinking the screen would somehow change, but it didn't. "Tasha," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not in the group anymore." "I know," she said quickly. "That's why I'm calling. They removed you tonight. Your mom told Brooke to do it." My hands went ice cold. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're my family," she said firmly. "Even if they don't act like it." My phone buzzed. One screenshot arrived, then another, then another. I stared at the first one and something inside me went very, very quiet. It was my mother's message, time-stamped 8:41 p.m. It said, "Mother's Day brunch is at the Belmont at 11. All my successful children will be there." Then, as casually as if she were discussing the weather, she added, "Maya chose to work in public schools. I will not be discussing her tomorrow." I read it once, then again, then a third time. My brain kept searching for hidden meaning, a joke, a misunderstanding, a typo. But there it was, plain, cold, calculated cruelty. Below her message, my sister Brooke replied with a champagne emoji. My brother Ethan wrote just one word. "Understood." One word. Like I was a stain they needed to remove. Like I was a problem to be managed. Like I wasn't their sister at all. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the edge of my couch, phone in my hands, breathing shallow and quiet. And that's when I realized something that hurt worse than the message itself. This wasn't a moment of anger. This was a decision they'd been making for years. From the outside, my family looked absolutely perfect. We lived in a pristine Virginia suburb where the lawns were manicured like they were competing for awards. My mother, Diane Caldwell, wore pearls like they were part of her identity. Not because she genuinely loved pearls, but because pearls said, "I belong here." She was the kind of woman who called the country club, the community, like it was sacred ground. She talked about standards the way other people talk about kindness or compassion. My sister Brooke was the crown jewel of the family, 36 years old, a dermatologist in Richmond. The kind of doctor who posted polished photos in white coats with captions like, "Grateful to help people feel confident." My brother Ethan was 39. He worked in finance in Washington, D.C. Always in motion, always in a tailored suit, always acting like he was late to something critically important. Their lives looked expensive. Their conversations sounded expensive. Even their laughter sounded expensive, like it had been practiced in front of mirrors. And then there was me, Maya, the youngest, the sweet one, the idealistic one. The one who didn't fit the carefully crafted family brand. I worked in public education. Not because I had failed at something else, but because I deliberately chose it. I was a school counselor. I helped kids who didn't have stable homes. Kids who didn't know where their next meal was coming from. Kids who acted out because they were terrified and didn't know how else to express it. I didn't make a lot of money. I didn't have designer clothes or expensive jewelry. I drove a 10-year-old Toyota Camry, and I absolutely loved my job. I loved it even more because it was challenging. Because it mattered. Because every single day I was making a real difference. But to my mother, It was embarrassing, because my mother didn't see work as service. She saw work as proof. Proof that she raised winners. Proof that she had value. Proof that people should admire her. And my job didn't fit into her carefully rehearsed speeches at the country club. When I was 18, I received a full scholarship to the University of Virginia. My mother told everyone like it was her personal trophy. She even bought a bumper sticker before I had chosen my major. Proud mom of a future doctor. That summer, I volunteered at a local youth center. It wasn't glamorous work. It was loud, messy, and severely underfunded. But there was this one kid, Jalen, 9 years old. Smart, funny, angry. He couldn't read well, but he pretended he didn't care. One day, he threw a book across the room and shouted, "I'm not stupid. I just don't do that reading stuff." I sat down beside him calmly and said, "Okay. Then we'll do it together." By the end of that summer, he finished an entire chapter book. When he did, he covered his face with his hands like he couldn't believe it was real. Then he whispered, "I didn't know I could do that." That moment grabbed my heart and never let go, so I called my mother that night with excitement in my voice. I told her I was changing my academic path. "I'm not doing pre-med," I said. "I want to work in schools. I want to help kids." Silence. Then her voice turned sharp and cold. "You're throwing your life away." "I'm not," I said firmly. "I'm choosing it." She laughed, not because anything was funny, but because something was pathetic to her. "You're going to spend your entire life babysitting other people's children for a government paycheck." I remember gripping my phone tightly and saying quietly, "Those kids aren't other people's children. They're just kids who deserve support." She didn't come to my college graduation. She said she had an important event to attend. Brooke sent me a generic greeting card with a $20 bill tucked inside and a note that said, "Good luck. You'll need it." Ethan didn't even send a text message. And my mother told all her friends I was taking a gap year to travel and find myself. She couldn't handle the truth of what I was actually doing. It wasn't like they officially disowned me in one dramatic confrontation. It was worse than that. It was slow, polite, strategic. Like a door closing so softly that no one could accuse them of slamming it. At Thanksgiving, I showed up with a homemade pie I'd spent hours perfecting. My mother glanced at it like it was a child's art project. Then I saw my place card, not at the main dining table, at a small side table in the corner, with the children. My mother smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, honey, you don't mind, right? You're so naturally good with children." I was 29 years old. At Christmas, I hand-knitted her a scarf. Not cheap yarn, real cashmere. I spent weeks working on it, making every stitch perfect. When she opened it, she said flatly, "How?" "Handmade." Then she opened Brooke's gift, a designer handbag worth thousands. Suddenly, my mother had tears in her eyes. "Oh, Brooke," she breathed dramatically. "You didn't have to do this." My scarf ended up in a closet, still wrapped, still in the box, untouched. The final cut came on her 60th birthday. I called and cheerfully asked what time dinner was. She sighed like I was exhausting her very existence. "Oh, Maya." The restaurant only had reservations for 6 people. 6. My father, Brooke, Ethan, and their partners. And my mother said without hesitation, "You understand, family comes first." Family comes first. But somehow I wasn't family enough to deserve the 7th seat. That's when it truly hit me. They weren't forgetting me. They were actively choosing to put me last, on purpose. So when that group chat message happened, when she told everyone not to mention my name, I wasn't shocked. I was confirmed. Like pressing on a bruise you already know will hurt. Mother's Day morning arrived. No phone call, no text message, no fake thinking of you gesture, nothing. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't send flowers. I didn't chase her approval. I didn't perform the role of dutiful daughter for someone who refused to claim me as her child. I made coffee. I sat in peaceful silence. Then I opened my phone and systematically blocked their numbers. My mother, my sister, my brother. I deleted all social media apps from my phone, not because I was being dramatic. because I desperately needed peace. And I told myself with absolute clarity, if they want me gone, I will be gone. Not because they demanded it, but because I choose it. Here's the part nobody in my family expected. I didn't fall apart. I didn't spiral into depression. I built something beautiful. I threw myself completely into my work. I started a specialized counseling program for students dealing with anxiety and trauma. I partnered with local nonprofits and community organizations. I wrote grant proposals and secured funding. I helped create a comprehensive mentorship program for new teachers entering the profession. And slowly, quietly, my school began to transform. Not because I was special or gifted, but because I genuinely cared. During that intense time of building, I met someone extraordinary. His name was Noah. He was a middle school assistant principal, tall, soft-spoken, the kind of man who listened with his entire being. We met at a boring district-wide meeting about standardized testing. Everyone was complaining about low test scores. Noah leaned over and whispered to me, "They keep asking why kids can't focus. Nobody bothers to ask what these kids are carrying every single day." That sentence hit me like a lightning bolt of truth. We became friends first, then coffee meetings, then long walks through the park. Then one evening, I told him everything about my family. He didn't interrupt me once. He didn't try to fix it or minimize my pain. He just said simply, "I'm so sorry they treated you like that. You deserved so much better." And for some reason, hearing that validation from someone outside my family felt like oxygen. Noah had a daughter from his previous marriage. Her name was Ellie. 6 years old, covered in freckles, full of loud opinions about everything. Her mother had passed away from cancer when Ellie was just a toddler. Ellie didn't need a replacement mother. She needed someone who would stay, someone consistent and loving, so I stayed. The first time she called me, Miss Maya was adorable. The first time she called me just Maya felt comfortable and normal. The first time she accidentally slipped and called me Mom, and then froze like she'd committed a terrible crime. I looked at her gently and said, "It's completely okay, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." She started crying. So did I. We held each other and cried together. Noah and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony. No pretentious country club venue. No expensive designer invitations. Just people who genuinely loved us and wanted to celebrate our happiness. Ellie walked down the aisle carefully holding a basket of flower petals like she was carrying something sacred and precious. That was my real family, not the one I was born into. The one I was deliberately and lovingly building. 4 years passed quietly. Then one ordinary Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from the Virginia Department of Education. A professional woman's voice said, "Ms. Caldwell, we're extremely pleased to inform you that you've been selected." Selected for what? I almost laughed out loud. I was so used to being overlooked and underestimated. But then she said the words that changed everything. "You're the new director of student support services for the entire region." It was a major leadership position. Oversight of multiple school districts. The opportunity to create real, systemic change. Significant responsibility and influence. 2 weeks later, my name appeared in local news publications. Not national headlines or celebrity gossip, but enough. Enough for someone like my mother to notice. Because my mother didn't miss people. She missed attention and opportunities for public validation. That same week, my cousin Tasha called me again, her voice filled with urgency. "Maya," she said breathlessly, "they're absolutely freaking out." "Who?" "Your mom and Brooke. They're in full panic mode because your mom has been telling everyone you moved overseas to work internationally." I blinked in confusion. "What?" "She told people you were working with an international education nonprofit. Africa, Europe." Something vague like that. I stared at my living room wall like it might somehow explain her behavior. "She lied," I whispered in disbelief. "Yeah," Tasha confirmed. "Because it sounded so much better than admitting she cut you off completely." And that's when something clicked into place in my mind. My mother didn't actually hate me. She hated what my real life said about her as a mother. So she created a completely fabricated version of me she could brag about, a version she could control, a version that never challenged her carefully constructed public image. 3 days after the news article was published, I received an email. The subject line read simply, "From your mother." I almost deleted it immediately without reading, but human curiosity is a stubborn, powerful thing, so I opened it. It started with, "My dearest Maya." I already felt my skin crawl with discomfort. Then she wrote, "I saw the wonderful news about your promotion. I always knew you had this potential inside you. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong about you. No, I hurt you deeply and I regret it. Just a smooth, effortless rewriting of our entire history." Then she added, "Mother's Day is coming up again. It would mean so much to me to have the whole family together again. Together again. Like we were characters in a heartwarming movie. Like nothing painful had ever happened between us. Like she hadn't publicly announced my exile in a family group chat. I didn't respond to her email, because silence is absolutely a response. It's just not the response that controlling people want to receive. 1 month later, I received a formal invitation to the state capitol for an education recognition ceremony. It wasn't just about my promotion. It was a prestigious statewide award specifically tied to student mental health programs, something my dedicated team had built completely from scratch. The event would be professionally recorded. There would be cameras everywhere, formal speeches, a ceremonial handshake with the governor himself. And when I carefully reviewed the official event itinerary, there was a section labeled, "Family Recognition Segment." I swallowed hard when I saw those words. Not because I missed my biological family, but because I knew exactly what kind of people suddenly appear when there's a public spotlight. That evening, Noah came into our kitchen and found me staring intensely at my laptop screen. "You okay?" he asked gently. I hesitated for a moment. Then I told him everything. About the group chat. About being removed. About the successful children comment. Noah didn't flinch or look shocked. He just asked calmly, "So what do you want to do?" That question mattered so much to me. Because the choice was mine. Not hers, not theirs. Mine. I stared at the glowing screen and said slowly, "They're going to try to show up at this event." Noah nodded like he'd already anticipated this. "And if they do show up," I exhaled deeply, "then I'm not going to fight them at the entrance. I'm not going to create a public scene." Ellie's small footsteps padded into the kitchen. She climbed into my lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. "What's wrong, Mom?" she asked with concern. I kissed her forehead tenderly. "Nothing you need to worry about or carry," I said softly. Then I looked directly at Noah. "If they want a photo opportunity, they can take pictures from the audience." Noah's eyes remained steady and supportive. "And what will you say during your speech on stage?" I thought carefully about my answer. I thought about every Thanksgiving where I sat at the children's table, every ignored text message, every calculated lie, and I said with absolute clarity, "I'm going to thank my family." Noah looked slightly confused. "Your mother?" I shook my head firmly. "My real family." The state capitol building looked like a monument to both history and judgment. Massive white columns, wide marble steps, security personnel stationed everywhere. Inside the main hall, the room was filled with dedicated educators from across the state. Principals with tired but determined faces. Teachers with passionate hearts. Counselors who understood struggle intimately. People with exhausted eyes but incredibly strong spirits. Noah sat beside me, solid and supportive. Ellie sat on my other side, wearing a cheerful yellow dress covered in tiny embroidered flowers. She swung her feet happily and whispered, "Mom, are you nervous?" I smiled at her honestly. "A little bit, sweetheart." She squeezed my hand tightly. "You're so brave," she said, like it was an undeniable fact. And then I felt it, that distinctive prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Like eyes boring into me. I didn't turn around immediately. I didn't have to, because I heard her voice. That voice I knew better than my own sometimes. "Excuse me," my mother announced loudly enough for nearby people to hear. "That's my daughter up there." I turned my head just slightly, and there they were. My mother dressed in cream-colored elegance and her signature pearls. Brooke in a bright red designer dress, perfectly camera-ready. Ethan in an expensive tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. They stood behind the reserved seating area like they owned the space. Like they had every right to this moment. My mother leaned toward a young volunteer coordinator. "We're immediate family," she said with entitled authority. "We need to be seated closer to the stage." The volunteer looked uncertain and uncomfortable. Noah reached for my hand protectively. "You want me to handle this situation?" he asked quietly. I shook my head calmly. "Let them sit wherever they want," I whispered, because sometimes the strongest move you can make is simply letting people reveal their true character. They eventually sat in the second row, uninvited, undeterred, shameless. My mother leaned toward the elegantly dressed woman next to her and said with clear pride, "I raised her, you know. Everything she is, everything she's accomplished, she owes to me." I felt Ellie shift uncomfortably in her seat. She looked over her shoulder with innocent confusion. "Do you know those people?" she whispered. I kept my eyes focused forward. "They're people from my old life," I answered honestly. Ellie frowned, processing this information. "Do they love you?" That simple question from a child hit me harder than anything my mother had ever said to me. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. Then I answered with complete honesty. "Not the way you do, sweetheart." Ellie nodded like she understood far more than a 6-year-old child should have to understand. Then she turned forward again and resumed swinging her feet. The ceremony host introduced the evening's program with practiced professionalism. Then my name was called clearly over the sound system. I stood and walked deliberately toward the podium. I could feel cameras tracking my movement. I could feel the weight of collective attention. And behind me, I could sense my mother waiting eagerly for her moment, like she was owed this recognition. I looked out at the assembled crowd, and for just a second, I saw my younger self clearly. The girl who kept desperately trying to earn a permanent seat at the family table. Then I took a deep, centering breath, and I spoke. "Thank you," I began with genuine gratitude. "To the Virginia Department of Education, the governor's office, and everyone here tonight." I talked passionately about children, about trauma and resilience, about how behavior is always communication if we're willing to listen, about how schools don't just teach mathematics and reading. They hold fragile lives together during the hardest moments. Then I paused deliberately, and I said the line I had practiced all week long. "I'd like to take a moment to thank my family." I turned toward Noah with a warm smile. I looked at Ellie with unconditional love. "My husband, Noah," I said clearly, "who believed in me completely when I was absolutely exhausted and doubting everything about myself." Ellie beamed so radiantly it looked like pure sunlight. "And my daughter, Ellie," I continued with emotion, "who taught me what unconditional love actually looks like in practice." I stopped speaking. That was it. No mention of Diane Caldwell. No acknowledgement of Brooke. No recognition of Ethan. Just honest, beautiful truth. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape loudly against the floor. Then her voice cut through the moment. "Maya," soft. Hurt, utterly performative. I didn't turn around yet. "Maya, sweetheart," she said louder, injecting wounded emotion into her tone. "Surely you didn't forget your own mother." The entire room shifted uncomfortably. People turned their heads. Cameras pivoted toward the disruption. My mother stood dramatically, already stepping toward the center aisle. She was going to walk up to the stage like this was her platform too. Like the last 4 years of painful silence didn't exist. Like her cruel message had never been written. I held the microphone with absolute calm, and I said evenly, without anger, "Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for attending this evening's ceremony." Her practiced smile tightened visibly. "I just wanted to," I continued, my voice perfectly steady. "The family portion of my speech has concluded." Her eyes widened just slightly. That tiny crack in her polished mask. And then I added, still completely calm, 4 years ago, you told our entire family not to mention my name. You specifically said you would not discuss me because I chose to work in public schools. A visible murmur rippled through the professional audience. My mother's face went pale, but she attempted to recover quickly. That was taken completely out of. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I simply finished the sentence that set me free. I'm honoring the boundaries you established. The people I just thanked are the people who stood beside me when I was invisible to you. Complete silence. A security officer stepped closer to her position, gently but firmly. My mother froze in place. Because for the first time in her carefully controlled life, she couldn't manipulate the narrative. And then something unexpected happened. Someone started clapping, slow at first, one person, then another person joined. Then the entire room rose like a powerful wave. Teachers, counselors, administrators, people who understood exactly what it meant to be called less than. They stood and applauded for me, not because I had won a prestigious award, but because I chose dignity over performance. Ellie looked up at me with shining, proud eyes and clearly mouthed, "That's my mom." I almost broke down crying right there at the podium. But I didn't. I just breathed deeply, and I finished my speech with grace. After the official ceremony concluded, I took required photos with various state officials, shook countless hands, smiled professionally, did all the expected public relations activities. Then, in the marble hallway outside, they cornered me. My mother moved first, her approach calculated. Her voice was low now, stripped of its public performance quality. "We need to talk privately, immediately." I kept my tone completely professional. "If you have something to say to me, you can say it right here." Brooke crossed her arms defensively. "You embarrassed her in front of everyone." I tilted my head slightly. "I stated facts. Nothing more." Ethan stepped forward with his calm, corporate negotiator voice. "Maya, think carefully about the optics of this situation." I let out a small, controlled breath. "The optics didn't seem to matter when you erased me from the family." My mother's carefully painted lips trembled slightly. "That message I sent." I was upset that day. I looked at her with steady, unwavering eyes. "You weren't upset. You were crystal clear about your intentions." Noah stepped protectively beside me. Ellie's small hand slipped securely into mine. My mother's eyes flicked down to Ellie with visible confusion. "Who is this child?" Her expression seemed to demand. Ellie looked up at me with complete trust. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. I nodded gently. "Yes, sweetheart, we can go home." Then I looked back at my mother one final time. "I'm not here to punish you," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm here to protect what I've built." Brooke scoffed dismissively. "You actually think you're better than us now?" I met her eyes directly. "No, I think I deserve love without impossible conditions attached." Complete silence. They had absolutely no response to that truth. Because people who only love conditionally don't understand unconditional love. Not until it's far too late. I turned away deliberately. Noah's warm hand rested supportively on my back. Ellie tucked safely against my side, and we walked out of that building without looking back even once. Several months later, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address printed anywhere, but I recognized my mother's distinctive handwriting immediately. I stared at the envelope for a long time before carefully opening it. Inside, she had written something I never thought she'd admit. "I was terrified of what people would think about our family. I treated your life choices like they were a direct reflection on my reputation as a mother." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't demand immediate reconciliation. She just wrote simply, "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what matters." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Noah asked me gently that evening, "What are you going to do about this?" I looked out our kitchen window at Ellie riding her bicycle enthusiastically in the driveway, laughing at something only she could see and understand. And I said with complete honesty, "I genuinely don't know yet." Then I added something important, but for the first time in my entire life, I don't feel like I have to know the answer right now. Here's what I learned through this painful journey. Some people don't actually love you. They love the version of you that benefits them personally. They love what you can give them. A story to tell, something to brag about, a flattering photo, a reputation boost. And when you stop being useful to their image, they call it disrespect. They call it betrayal. They accuse you and say you changed. But the truth is, you didn't change. You just stopped shrinking yourself to fit their expectations. You can understand someone's deep wounds without letting them continue to cut you. You can have genuine compassion without handing them unlimited access to hurt you again. And boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls built from hatred or bitterness. They're doors, and you get to decide who walks through them. So I want to ask you directly, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your peace? If you have, comment yes below. I read every single comment. All of them matter to me, and if you're still here watching, thank you, because being truly seen by the right people can heal things you thought would never heal. My name is Maya. And I finally learned something my mother never did. Love is not a reward you earn. It's a choice you make. If it helped you even a little, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. I'll see you in the next story.